Today on Straight Talk Africa, Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari says he is seeking re-election. The election is scheduled for February 16, 2019. The announcement was met with mixed reaction. That's coming up next right here on Straight Talk Africa. Hello, welcome to Straight Talk Africa, live from the Voice of America headquarters here in Washington. I am Shaka Sali.
And hello to all of our viewers and listeners on the continent and elsewhere. I'm Haiti Adams Fitzpatrick. I'll be your social media reporter.
Today, it's a discussion on the significance of the Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari's announcement to seek re-election in 2019.
And coming up later, our audience has weighed in on our topic through emails, Facebook and Twitter comments. We'll reveal some of them ahead here on Straight Talk Africa.
Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari has confirmed that he will seek his party's presidential ticket to contest elections in February 2019. His announcement ends months of speculation about his future. After bouts of ill health, my colleague Paul Cisco has more.
The inauguration of Muhammadu Buhari as the 15th president of Nigeria took place on May 29, 2015. It marked a new beginning for Buhari as head of state. It was an historic event and a great day for Nigerians. For the first time, a Nigerian incumbent went peacefully down to defeat in Africa's biggest democracy.
Our country has now joined community of nations that have used the ballot box to peacefully change an incumbent president in a free, fair election.
Then the former military and opposition leader was swept to victory over President Goodluck Jonathan.
I promised the country free and fair elections. I've kept my word. I've also expanded the space for Nigerians to participate in the democratic process.
On April 9th, following a meeting with executive members of the ruling All Progressive Congress, President Buhari announced on his Twitter account that he's seeking a spot on the APC's presidential ticket and a second victory and term in the nation's February 16, 2019 presidential poll. It remains unclear whether others in the party will challenge the incumbent. President Buhari spent part of 2017 in London receiving treatment for an undisclosed illness. After more than 100 days in the hospital, throngs of cheering Nigerians welcomed his return to Abuja last August. He met with British Prime Minister Theresa May at 10 Downing Street this week, at least in part for the meeting of the Commonwealth heads of government ongoing in Britain through Friday. Buhari became president under a faltering economy and facing severe security threats and challenges from the Boko Haram terrorist group. April 14th marked the 4th anniversary of the group's notorious kidnapping of nearly 300 schoolgirls in Chibok. The Boko Haram insurrection has been underway for nearly 9 years. It's estimated that the war has claimed tens of thousands of lives and displaced over 2 million people. Last year, the United States approved the sale of 12 military planes and security equipment worth $600 million to Nigeria to help fight terrorism. Meanwhile, Buhari's critics and those in opposition question the 75-year-old's fitness for office. They say the economy is still in disarray and he has not fulfilled his campaign promises to tackle corruption and insecurity in the country's northeast. On April 30th, President Buhari meets with U.S. President Donald Trump at the White House. They'll discuss their partnership in the war on terror, trade, promoting economic growth and reforms, and building on Nigeria's role as a democratic leader in West Africa. Paul Cisco, VOA News, Washington.
Thanks, Paul, for that interesting report. Joining us here in the studio are two distinguished guests. Karen Atiya, editor, Global Opinions at the Washington Post, and Ogbeni Lanle Banjo, former gubernatorial candidate of the southwestern Nigerian state of Ogun. Well, I have to say that I am profoundly honored and exceedingly humbled to have the opportunity to host the two of you on Straight Talk Africa.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. Last but not least is expected to be Adiola Fayem, host and producer Keeping It Real with Adiola. She will be joining us from VOA studios in New York. Later in the program, we'll give you, our audience, a chance to call in with your question or comment. The number to call is 202-619-3111, and the US country code is 1. Let me come to you immediately, Karen. You've been obviously covering the world and definitely Nigeria. When you heard that Nigerian incumbent President Buhari was seeking re-election, what was your immediate reaction?
I think I would say my immediate reaction, I just thought, considering Nigeria's demographics, considering the fact that more than half of the population is quite young, what message does it send that Buhari is 75 years old, yes, has had questions with his health, is leading a country that is so incredibly young people who are frustrated, perhaps, with a lack of employment opportunities. And so I just thought, sort of, this is in keeping with the trend of African leaders. We think of Mugabe, for instance, African leaders who are from a generation that is perhaps not in touch or not in tune with the demographic shifts of young people that the country is facing. So I'm skeptical, at least, but it fits a pattern.
There's nothing particularly strange here, because you know as well as I do that the average age of leaders or rulers in Africa is around 60, 65.
Why does that happen? When can the young people have a chance, perhaps, to be able to rise up in politics in Africa?
Will probably tell us later in the discussion. Sure. What about you, Lanley?
I am not shocked.
Why?
Someone in comfort wants to die in comfort. He has every right to say he wants to contest or seek re-election again, but Nigerians have every right to vote him out and disgrace him. So that's why I'm not really shocked, given his poor performance.
But in fairness to President Buhari,
yes,
you're not really your typical African president, because this is a man, frankly, who is, for example, incorruptible. He's not someone, frankly, that you could call a thief.
Well, Shaka, if you remember, I was right here in this studio in March of 2015 campaigning for President Buhari, but he disappointed me. He disappointed a lot of visionary Nigerians. When he came to power, first of all, here is someone who was a minister of petroleum, someone who was a governor, a head of state, a governor when he was in military, someone who was a head of state when he overthrew President Shehu Shagari, someone who worked with Abacha in contravention of the June 12th election and became the chairman of Petroleum Trust Fund. When he said to all of us, if he became the president again, the price of petroleum will decline. That price rose by 67%. I mean, someone who told all of us that at 71, it could not be as effective as he was when he was head of state. You ask him at 75, what was he going to do? Or at 76, if he wins next year, which I hope he will not win. But this gentleman, I said he disappointed people like me because he brought out what fella called the beast.
Meaning?
Now, before Buhari came to power, we have had our fellow Fulanis all over the West, all over Africa. He came to power, these Fulani were just killing, committing genocide all over the country, especially in Benue. My president did not act. I mean, that is one. Number two, all we are hearing is that he's fighting corruption. How can you fight corruption without asking yourself, somebody stole billions, he siphoned these billions out of the country to another country. How was he able to do it? And then establish policies to discourage it. this government is not doing that. And then government corruption is also growing under him. And when anytime they either arrested or caught someone serving him, they will find an excuse. So it goes on and on. Then the value of our naira again declined by 70%. I mean, that's not what I came here to say when I was campaigning for President Muhammadu Buhari.
Now, Khalid, let's face it, President Buhari ran on security, curbing corruption, and the economy, of course, was very stupid. What does the report card look like so far?
I mean, well, first of all, it's interesting that your package talked about this as a 4-year anniversary of the Chibok girls kidnapping, and it's arguably so, that the Goodluck Jonathan administration, that really sort of dealt a death blow to the Goodluck Jonathan administration, not for the very least on the international stage. So far, okay, Boko Haram is still active. Boko Haram is still able to kidnap girls, still able to launch suicide attacks. It's nowhere near the level it was 2015, where they were actively capturing and holding territory and pushing the military out. However, he did declare that there was a technical victory over Boko Haram, and it's very clear that Boko Haram is still here, still active. And at the very least, you know, the government has negotiated, and there are reports of the government at £3 million ransom to secure the release of some kidnapped girls. But, you know, this, especially when it comes to the relations with the United States, a lot of the Nigeria's position has been to the United States, well, we need more help. We need you to sell us more equipment, more military equipment, more aircraft. In my view, whether or not the war on Boko Haram can be won in the air, or whether any war can be won in the air, I highly doubt. And I think there's plenty of cases where more active intelligence gathering really is the way forward in this. But yeah, as far as his report card, it's still very mixed. Again, on economics, and Nigeria just came out of, or hasn't come out of, serious recession. The prices of oil have fallen. Nigeria still has a checkered record, I think, on that. But he has said all the right things. The fact that he does have a meeting with Trump, and that he was one of the first African leaders that Trump called when he came to office, is significant. Nigeria cannot be ignored from the American perspective. It is one of the most powerful and significant countries on the continent. But again, I think there are a lot of people here in Washington who did expect more, who did expect a lot from Buhari, perhaps unfairly. But I still think, you know, we still have to judge him by what he was measured up against in the beginning. He inherited a very sort of dicey situation.
Very difficult situation. I mean, in fairness to him, really, let's face it, you touched on the issue of Boko Haram. When he came into power, when he went to Abuja, Aso Rock, let's face it, when you talk about Boko Haram occupied territory, almost, in fact, the size of the kingdom of Belgium. The last time I checked, they no longer hold any territory anywhere. Isn't that correct, Landon?
Well, the issue of Boko Haram is dicey, and this is why I said so. Before President Muhammadu Buhari came to power, he supported, not actively, not overtly, Boko Haram. He made statements in support of Boko Haram.
Where is the evidence?
It's in the paper.
Bring the evidence.
Yes. I mean, it's in the paper that he said Boko Haram should be treated the same way Niger Delta are treated. In other words, we should negotiate exactly with amnesty. So, and as we speak, his Attorney General just issued a statement that the International Crime ICC cannot investigate all this genocide committed by Boko Haram. Why are they saying that if that would not lead to somebody being behind them? So it's a shenanigan.
But when we talk about Boko Haram, we talk about, Boko Haram, what are the fundamental root causes, frankly, of their existence?
Only those who are in power, including President Buhari, can tell you the truth.
Oh,
I cannot tell you the truth. I'm telling you, that is it. But let me say this, my fellow. I mean, let's not deceive ourselves. Anytime any sitting American government calls any of his, let me say, use the word boys in these African countries, it's about American interest, not about my interest. So if you call Donald Trump, call him, that doesn't affect me. They will sit him to the table. He's in London now, speaking with their mother, coming to speak with the father on April 30th. Nothing there will be nothing there for the interest of Nigerians.
Landley, you really have to be fair to President Buhari, because let's face it, the last time I checked, the reason he is in London is attending a Commonwealth conference.
Yes.
So what's the problem? What's the problem with that?
There is no problem with that. All I'm just saying is that when you now meet with the Prime Minister in London, Theresa, you speak for Nigerians. The last time that he was there, the former Prime Minister said Nigerians are fantastically corrupt. If I were the president, I would have asked him, how can Nigeria be fantastically corrupt when you stole all over African countries and you call yourself Great Britain?
But actually, I think he did a bit of that to David Cameron.
Sure. I mean, I don't want to, and I've written plenty about America's sort of over-militarized policy towards the continent. I think a lot of what needs to be done from the American side is look more at Africa and Nigeria as a source of trade, as a source of more equal partnership. I agree with you there. But remember when Buhari came the last time and he demanded of the Americans, we want your help in locating our stolen wealth. That is something that America does have the capacity to do. So I think that is in the interest of Nigerians, to come here and try to find out where its wealth is being hidden and plundered. And I hope he brings that up as part of the agenda. And I hope, and I think it's fair to ask Buhari to come to the United States and press for the interests of Nigerians. And I think that would be trade. And I think that would be job creation. I think that would be help, any sort of assistance in managing this population sort of boom that they're going through. But it is a special and it's an important relationship, and I don't want to just dismiss it out of hand. But again, I think you're right. It's on the African leaders to come aggressively with their own agendas and present their cases.
What about the issue of corruption, you know, I mean, let's face it, you are a Nigerian, you've lived there off and on and all that kind of stuff, and you tried several times to become the governor of Ogun State in Abeokuta, correct?
Yes.
I mean, let's face it, when you talk about corruption in Nigeria, my friend, you know what you're talking about. You know what you are up to, because corruption in Nigeria is not benign, is malignant, is institutionalized, really. Do you sincerely think, if you were to talk to me from the deepest, better part of the bottom of your Nigerian heart and soul, that anybody could, in fact, you know, curb corruption in Nigeria in the last 3 years?
Well, I have been there, I am still there, and I'm working in their midst. President Buhari alone cannot curb and fight corruption. It's absolutely impossible.
But he has tried. Well, and he seems to be still trying, let's face it.
What I'm saying is this: $370 million were stolen by Abacha. When Obasanjo was there, $386 million.
Only that?
No, it's as part of what was recovered from Switzerland.
Oh, you mean what has been recovered so far?
Yes. Yeah. Today, as we are speaking, President Buhari's Attorney General is asking the recovery again to be renegotiated. And the attorney in Switzerland said nothing to be renegotiated. He had completed the job. The Attorney General under President Buhari wants to be paid $17 million. My sister, Mrs. Kami Adeosun, had to stop that. We did not hear from President Buhari on this issue. And what I'm telling you is, yes, it's good to make noise about corruption. When he first came there, everybody was scared. But as they settled down, people started their corruption again. The point is that to fight corruption, you have to ask yourself, how are all this money being stolen? what can we do to stop it? That is not being done.
And
then the money that they took, they are not telling us how they spend it.
If you were the man occupying Asorok right now, talk to us what you would actually specifically do in order to fight and win the victory against corruption in Nigeria.
That's exactly what I just said. I will first of all study, I will get my experts together to study how those monies were stolen. Those are loopholes.
So how do you know he's not doing that?
He is not doing it, because if he's not doing it, people working in his cabinet as we speak will not be doing the same thing. I just give an example of this Attorney General.
You've been trying to be governor of Ogun State.
Yes. I
just completed a book written by a daughter of former Nigerian President Olusegun Obasanjo. We're talking about Dr. Iyabo Obasanjo.
Yes.
African president's daughter.
Yes.
She was a commissioner for some years in Abeokuta.
Yes.
She was a senator in Abuja.
Yes.
And if you read that book, to be very honest with you, once again, this is not a very, very easy thing to deal with.
I agree with you. I'm going through it as I'm sitting here. Where you read to people, this is what the corporate governors of Nigeria say. And these crooks don't want change. They will gang up against me. They gang up against me. However, I still insist. And when they observe that I'm insisting, they blend. It's not easy. Even here, there's corruption in the United States. However, because there's institution there, there are laws there, and people have been caught, people have been jailed. So that's the difference. But over there, we're still with impunity.
So what kind of leadership do you sincerely think that Nigeria needs, frankly? Because let's face it, there is a saying that no society gets a leadership that it desires, but rather what you get actually is what you deserve.
Well, because Nigerians, I'm going to be frank with you, Nigerians have been voting their values. In other words, take money for vote. That's why we're having this. Hopefully, with this Buhari thing, they will learn from it, and let's pray that they will reject money for vote. That will bring the good leadership.
And I think this is not just Nigeria, but these political systems in general. The fact that, again, we're talking about how much can Buhari do in just 3 years, and it's giving me deja vu, the fact that we're already going through elections next year in 2019. And so this question, again, of the incentives and whether or not these leaders are being given enough time sometimes to be able to carry out their agendas. And again, the fact that he's going to be going into perhaps campaign mode instead of, maybe some would say, instead of working on some of these issues, working on some of these problems ahead in the next year, is just something that is not only endemic to Africa, but even here in the United States, when you're in continual sort of campaign mode. Again, some would use that as an example for people to stay in power for life. I'm not arguing that, but just to consider, is 4 years for any country, especially one with as many issues as Nigeria does, as many people as Nigeria does, is 4 years really enough to really realistically, to be realistic and expect change?
No, my friend. Number one, you have to understand, that's why I gave you his background. He has been a head of state. He has been ministers. Being a head of state in any country, you are privy to certain information. We have Federal Executive Council that is supposed to be attending. He refrained from attending it on principles which I...
But you don't, but you don't work alone.
Let me finish. No, but he's privy to certain information. This gentleman has contested 3 times to be president of Nigeria. So I expected him to have got some plans.
But running for office doesn't mean you know...
No. But he's like me, though. He's privy to certain information.
Sure, okay.
Let's face it, Landry. I mean, there is a saying, and you should really be very, very, aware of it, that when someone is running for office, they actually do it in poetry.
I agree.
They promise heaven on earth. But when they get into office, governing, when it comes to the business of governing, they actually do it in prose.
I agree.
Correct?
Correct, but what I'm saying...
So what's your problem?
It's not my problem.
Keep referring, to the background of the man.
What I'm saying is that for someone who had contested 3 times, it shouldn't take him 3 months to have a chief of staff. It should not take him 6 months to fill his cabinet. It should not take him 23 months to have head of agencies. And then when you now become the president, you now hear or see on television that INEC, which is our electoral body, is registering kids. Kids. And President said nothing because that's part of his country.
We'll come to that later. Karen, let me come to you. In 2009, I was in the Ghanaian capital, Accra, with President Barack Obama.
Oh, I was there.
When he addressed the continent and talked about how Africa does not need strong men, it needs strong institutions. And of course, he talked the talk, but frankly, it didn't seem to walk that talk for Africa. What about Nigeria? What does it really need?
What does it really need? I mean, I think, first of all, I think if you ask many Nigerians, first of all, they'll want jobs. I think very just individual security. I was listening to a program on the BBC just a few days ago about men in Nigeria and how sort of this issue of polygamy and marrying multiple wives or having multiple women, but the insecurity that men...
Can they support them?
That was the issue. There was a gentleman who was like, oh, I have 2 wives. He has 3 wives, and they asked, well, if you could, or do you regret taking the 3rd wife because you can't support them? He's like, and they looked around, to see if the wife was around, and honestly, he said he regretted it because so much of what his identity was as a person is about whether or not he can provide for people or provide for his family and provide for not only his family but the community, right? So I think, what Nigeria needs, yes, is institutions, but I think just like here in the United States, when you talk of, oh, we need institutional reform, for most people, I think it's the same everywhere. They want to know that they'll be able to provide for their families, and they want to know that they'll be able to have lights on, electricity from day to day. I mean, that was an issue also in Ghana recently as well, the rolling blackouts, and also just how they want to know that they'll have an opportunity. So again, I think with Buhari and with the state of Nigeria, the fact that I think, first of all, when it comes to economic issues, Nigeria depending so long on its oil wealth for its income, which obviously has led to the fantastic spread of corruption, but also has left it permanently economically vulnerable. So I would think is to have institutions that are able to diversify the economy. Can Lagos be Africa's next Silicon Valley? We remember Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of Facebook, visited Lagos in 2015, I believe, and said he wanted to build a hub there, right? So that sort of, I think that a lot of us outside of Nigeria just see that there's so much promise and so much potential. But again, I agree with you with Buhari. He did take a long time to form his government. What did they, go slow, Baba go slow?
Baba go slow.
But
what about our own Donald Trump?
Okay.
Up to now.
What about him?
In terms of, putting his cabinet together, appointing people in certain very important positions. As we talk today, there is still no person who is Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but Shaka, there's an institution in this place. There's an institution. Over there in Nigeria, there is no institution.
But I would say what we're learning in America is institutions are only as good as the people in them.
I agree.
And they're only as good as our institutions are held together by certain norms. And I think what we're seeing in the United States is that those norms are fragile. Yes. And that is very vulnerable. And to your point about not having an Assistant Secretary of State for Africa, I mean, even Rex Tillerson, the former Secretary of State's trip to Africa, he cut short his trip to Nigeria. This was not too long after Trump made his comments about the continent.
Then he got fired.
Yes, and then he got fired. So Africa is probably looking at us as perhaps not the model, right, of institutions, of great democracy, of great diplomacy. I wouldn't blame them for that, honestly.
Well, time happens not to be our best ally. You are tuned into Straight Talk Africa. We'll have more of a discussion in a moment, including a social media segment. So please don't go away, because we'll be right back with you.
Like Voice of America on Facebook. Follow VOA on Twitter. Join VOA on our YouTube channel. Like, follow, join VOA.
This is Straight Talk Africa on the Voice of America. Call us now with your questions and comments. The number is 202-619-3111 and the U.S. country code is 1. Call us direct and we'll call you right back. Remember to turn down the volume on your radio or television and keep your comments brief. Now back to Straight Talk Africa.
Thank you very much, Sister Gizuyu Yuwat, and of course, welcome back to Straight Talk Africa, live from Washington. It's time to bring in our social media reporter, Heidi Adams-Fitzpatrick. Take it away, Heidi.
Thank you very much, Shaka. We've received really great social media feedback this week. Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari says he will seek his party's presidential ticket to contest elections in February 2019, ending months of speculation about his future after spending 5 months in Britain last year being treated for an undisclosed ailment. This leads us to our question of the week, which asked, how do you feel about Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari running for a second term in 2019? Let's start here with a tweet from Francis Omoni. He tweets, African leaders just have issues. Even if the country is on the verge of collapsing, they feel it should collapse with them in power. We have another tweet from Kels, and he says, Nigeria, as it stands today, does not have a president. What we have is a visiting president who could also pass as the Nigerian ambassador to the UK. Nigerians are killed daily by bandits and security personnel. Now to our social media comment of the week from Facebook fan Frank Nwamanya. He's from Uganda and he writes, I think President Buhari has showed the willingness to tackle the problem of corruption, and we all know how deep-rooted it is. If the majority of the Nigerians give him a chance, that is fine with me. Let's go to another comment from Facebook fan Muhammad Ahmed Mansour in Liberia, who writes, I think President Muhammadu Buhari is not fit to run for a second term in 2019 because of ill health. He should give others a chance. Nigeria is not his personal property. Enough is enough. And our last Facebook comment comes from Uber Donald from Nigeria, who writes, President Buhari should simply stay away. We have had enough of fake promises. The painful truth is that he's being backed by saboteurs. And so a reminder for you that we do appreciate all of your audience feedback. If you are a new fan, do drop us a line at africatv@voanews.com. And you can comment on our Facebook page. Just enter these keywords, Straight Talk Africa. Be sure, of course, to visit us online at voaafrica.com. And you can join our YouTube channel. Just sign up to VOA TV2 Africa. And do follow us on Twitter at VOA Shaka. And of course, Straight Talk Africa streams live every Wednesday on Facebook, or you can simply go to VOA Straight Talk Africa TV program page that is on our website. And to watch us live on your mobile device, download the VOA mobile app. Now let's take a look at what is ahead for next week's program. On the next Straight Talk Africa, join us for a special broadcast on autism, hosted by VOA health correspondent Lenore Mudu. She will host a panel of experts to demystify and discuss some of the misunderstandings around autism and the challenges faced by families. Don't miss our special edition program, Autism, Breaking the Silence, on the next Straight Talk Africa. And that is all for today's social media segment. Shaka, you and the guests, of course, have a lot of social media comments to discuss, so I'm going to hand it back to you.
Thanks, Heidi, of course. And today we are talking about the significance of Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari's announcement to seek re-election in 2019. Our guests are Karen Atia, editor, Global Opinions, The Washington Post. Ogbeni Lanle Banjo, former gubernatorial candidate of the southwestern Nigerian state of Ogun, and Adiola Fayehun, host and producer, keeping it real with Adiola, who joins us, of course, from the Big Apple, New York. Well, I have to say, ladies and gentlemen, I am profoundly honored and exceedingly humbled to have the opportunity for the three of you on Straight Talk Africa.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're most welcome. Good afternoon, Adiola.
Good afternoon, Shaka.
How are you?
I'm good, and you?
It's great to see you again after almost like 2 years or 3 years.
Yeah.
Talk to us about Nigeria and incumbent President Muhammadu Buhari. What was your immediate reaction when you heard that Mr. Buhari is seeking re-election?
I don't think he should run again. I think he's had his chances. And I said that because he's had the rare opportunity of being the president twice. This is his second time of being Nigeria's president. He was the head of state in the 80s, and now he's been president. And when he was campaigning, he said he will only do one time because of his age. He's 75. He's going to be 76 this year in December. That means he's going to be president till he turns 80. In the last 3 years that he's been president, he has not kept his promises. He has not done so many things that he said he would do. The very first thing that people have issues with, including myself, is the fact that he went to London for 3 months for medical treatment after promising that in his tenure he would end medical tourism. So I would think if you have to go to London for 3 months, coming back, the first thing you would want to do is to make sure that the healthcare in Nigeria is straightened out. But that has not been the case. He hasn't done that. And so many things that have happened. People are dying every day. When Fulani Hasman started killing people, he didn't take it seriously. And he criticized Goodluck Jonathan when Jonathan was in power, when the Chibok girls were kidnapped. And he also promised that he would not be slow in responding to issues. He would not let issues fester. He hasn't kept that promise. Meanwhile, when his son got in an accident on his motorbike, he flew his son to Germany. What about regular Nigerians that don't have the resources to fly abroad for medical treatment? So he hasn't kept his promise in terms of reviving our healthcare. He hasn't kept his promise in terms of just basic amenities. We are asking for our rights. It doesn't mean that speaking the truth doesn't mean you are in the opposition or anything. Being a Nigerian, I have the right to feel safe in my country. Last week, dozens of people were killed when some robbers went to rob banks in Kwara State. So he's not been proactive, and clearly he's not fit because of his health. Till now, we don't know how his health is. He has not addressed Nigerians to actually say, this is what's going on with me, this is where I am health-wise. We don't know how he's doing health-wise. He's not accountable to us, and that has to stop. So I don't think he should run again, but of course he will. But as a young Nigerian, I don't think he should run again.
What about if he told you that he is probably succumbing to the pressure of his party? And I'm talking about, of course, the All Progressives Congress, APC.
Well, he has to find something to say, but I think it's ironic for you to say that you're succumbing to pressures of the people when people are voicing out every day that we no longer want you there in power. He has had his chance. I'm not saying that he didn't try, but clearly his best is not enough. He said he would fight corruption, but the corruption has been one-sided. A lot of people that they went after have been people that are not in his party, and it's not just that. Nobody has actually been successfully prosecuted since he became president, and he came into power on the back of promising that he would go after corruption. When he first became president, everybody became afraid. People straightened themselves up because they thought he would go after corruption like he promised. But that has not been the case. So many people are corrupt in his administration. When he went to Chatham House in London, he said that corruption will not be part of his administration. He will not appoint anybody that is corrupt. That has not been the case. He has appointed a lot of people that are corrupt. We know so many people that are corrupt in his government till today, and no one has been successfully prosecuted. So, of course, he would say pressure or whatever. But, you know, another thing that baffles me is Buhari is 75. You know, you get to a point in your life that you realize you're getting old and you want to leave a legacy when you die. You know that the inevitable will come someday. At the age of 75, I would think he would want to leave a legacy that, you know what, I tried it, I couldn't fix it, okay, I let somebody else come in. Right now, Nigeria needs someone that is young and physically fit, that we don't have to worry about his health, at least, among other things, and not corrupt, hopefully. So I don't think that running right now is what he should be doing. I think he should take time to rest. And, you know, I'm very concerned about his health. So I think he should take time to rest so that we don't have to worry about maybe tomorrow he will go to London for medical treatment when people are dying every day in Nigeria.
Adiora, you allege that Mr. Buhari, or General Buhari for that matter, is fighting corruption selectively. That there are members of his party or people who are very close to him who are corrupt and should actually be in a sense, should be dealt with. Are you in a position to name names?
Am I in position to name names?
Yes.
Actually, there has been people whose names are out there that he didn't really do anything about. His chief of staff has been in some corruption issues. There are so many names out there. Sometimes I have, it doesn't come to me when I'm on the spot, but there are so many names out there that he's aware of that he could go after. And at least we all know also about the Senate president. He still has pending case in court. There are so many issues.
Does the Senate president have a name?
That's Senator Bukola Saraki.
And what is he? He's corrupt, huh?
He's the Senate president.
Is he corrupt?
Is he corrupt? I have read about him, but he has never been convicted or charged in court.
Charges against him, several corruption charges against him. He's been dragged to court. We've been on it now for years. I think he recently hinted that he would also run for president.
Yes.
He's still presiding over the Senate. Corruption is now celebrated in Nigeria every day. They are no longer afraid. They are no longer ashamed. That's one thing. We thought when Buhari, so many people believed in Buhari. I believed in him when he came into power. And people thought once Buhari gets into power, there will be no more corruption. Now they are so bold, and all the people that have been arrested, so someone would steal like billions of dollars and they would fine them maybe $2 million, and then that's the end of it. Right now we dropped in the corruption index. Ghana is now doing better than Nigeria. Kenya is now better than Nigeria. We're worse than we were when Goodluck Jonathan was in power in terms of corruption index. So he hasn't done what he promised. And not just that. It's like he's not really the one in charge. We have the cabal, people that are actually in charge. And his wife had voiced out about this. So I don't think he should run.
Adiola, you talk about corruption in Nigeria, frankly, as if it is a recent phenomenon, because I remember when I was a kid back in southwestern Uganda in high school, I was reading one of Chinua Achebe's classic books. We're talking about The Man of the People, which was published in 1966, and it was in fact a reflection of nothing but corruption.
Well, corruption has always been the biggest problem in Nigeria. I mean, if you look at how much money has been stolen in Nigeria till date. I remember in the early 2000s, we were talking about more than $500 billion had been stolen by Nigerian officials. And I did a story about what that money could do, how that money could have transformed Nigeria. So definitely corruption is not a new thing in Nigeria. But for so long, Nigerians have been waiting for a leader that would tackle corruption so that we can finally move on. This corruption has affected us in every level. It is the reason why we don't have good roads everywhere in Nigeria. If you go to Abuja, you will find some really nice roads, but then when you get outside Nigeria, it's like, what the heck happened here? I went home not long ago, and I traveled by road, and first of all, when you're traveling in Nigeria, everybody becomes one because you all have to pray before you take off. It doesn't matter whether you're Christian or Muslim. Nobody knows whether you actually get to where you're going. So everybody prays together out loud. The Muslims pray, the Christians pray, because it's like a death trap when you're traveling in Nigeria on so many roads. So when you get on the road, the first thing is it doesn't matter where you're from or what ethnicity or what religion. You unite because you may all die before you get home. So you all pray before you get on the road to travel. Why should that still be an issue? When I was younger, the roads were better than now. The roads were better than now because we don't maintain anything. It's because of corruption that people embezzle the money meant to fix roads. People embezzle money meant to provide us with electricity. They told us that we would have electricity as soon as they come into power. I interviewed the vice president. I interviewed Buhari. They said they would give us good electricity when they come into power. Till today, they're still telling us stories about electricity. We live on the equator. We shouldn't even have electricity problems. But we don't have leaders that are visionary. We don't have leaders that can think about using technology, things like solar power and stuff like that. We need leaders that are visionary, somebody that is young, somebody that we don't have to worry about his or her health at least, and somebody that is hopefully tech savvy so that we can be on the same page with the rest of the world, so that Nigeria Nigeria can also develop Nigeria. We miss the industrial age. We shouldn't miss the technology. I mean, I don't think he should run, is what I'm trying to say. I get worked up when I'm thinking about this because it's like, for how long would we wait in Nigeria? Nigeria is supposed to be the leader in Africa. We're supposed to be the giant of Africa. So many countries are already passing us by in Africa. Ghana is doing really well. Botswana is doing really well. Kenya is also doing really well. So many countries have already left us behind. So I don't think he should run.
It's very interesting, Karen. Well, she talked especially about, you know, like health care. Nigeria is one of those countries that produces many, many doctors, many, many nurses for export. In fact, you have the Oga Patapatas of Nigeria, the rich people. They get sick, they go to London. Guess what? They actually get to be treated by Nigerian doctors.
Yes.
They go to South Africa, the same thing. They come to the United States, the same thing. And we have, and it's not limited to Nigeria, by the way. You can, in fact, pretty much talk about Africa. We have had several African presidents dying in Europe. Zambia has probably the African record because it has 2 presidents. One, Patrick Levy-Mwanawasa, I think it was 2008, he died in France. And Michael Sata, I think it was about 2014 or something, he died in the UK.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think my parents are from Ghana. My father is from Ghana, and so Ghanaians also have the sort of drama of having a leader die in office, John Atta Mills, and it's the same thing. The speculation about his health, the secret trips to abroad to seek medical treatment, and it was just the question of why can't you be transparent? Why can't you be safe? This is not just a matter of your own personal health; it's a national security issue. Even the insecurity about a leader's health. I think Adiola brought up a lot of really good points, and I could really feel the emotion in her voice and the sort of impatience and the frustration, I think. And I'm just curious, and I would ask you this question, like 2 questions. So then who could be perhaps somebody to think about in Nigeria? And also I just wonder, I keep hearing, you know, things were better in the past, and sometimes that fills me with a little bit of nervousness, because as we know, Nigeria has not been a pluralistic democracy for that long. So when someone says, roads were better when I was a child, does that mean that this democracy that Nigeria has chosen to go to is not delivering for its people? I'm just throwing that back out.
Just hold on, Lanley. Let me first of all, frankly, go to the lifeline of the show, which are the telephone callers. Bring in those questions, and then you can come back to you. Good afternoon, Tedla from New York. Tedla, can you hear me? Let me go to, what about Tafa from Ghana?
Hello, good evening, Shaka.
Good evening, Tafa. How are you?
I'm great, Shaka. What about you?
I am hugely terrific, especially to hear your voice after a very, very long time. What is your question, Tafa?
Yes, Shaka. My question goes to our 2 guests. I've heard them try to blame Buhari for disturbances between Fulani herdsmen and then their neighbors. And I don't think they have been fair to Buhari or they've been fair to Fulani. The way they generalize it, they mention Fulani claims. That is, Buhari is arming Fulani, they are attacking non-Fulani. I'm a Fulani myself. I have never supported Buhari. I'm not a Nigerian, but I didn't support him. I was supporting Good Luck didn't win. So for them to generalize it, Fulanis are non-Fulanis attacking them, aided by Buhari, I think that is not fair. Because we know for a fact that this issue of Fulanis and other farmers go way back. They've been fighting on Nigeria and daily basis before Buhari came to power. I'm appealing to them that this is not the best to generalize it as if Buhari is allowing Fulanis to be attacking Fulani. We can do our debate, argue that without trying to centralize the whole thing. This is good for Africa. When Kwame Nkrumah even attempted to remove all the barriers, we are all one.
Tafa,
if something is wrong, if
Tafa, I'm afraid I think, frankly, your point is well made. Thank you. What is your reaction?
Well, the president, the government is saying Fulani harassment. The president himself said it's caused by the dead Gaddafi.
But this is a national issue. You're talking about, frankly, you're talking about cultures who you have pastoralists on one hand, and you have people who are engaged in tilling the land. So frankly, it is the conflict between the whole, which is really in Africa for the most part, no tractors, the whole, and the cow. The cow has to have unfettered access to grass, to water. And the people who are engaged in agriculture have to protect their crops. There has to be some kind of solution.
That is exactly what I'm saying. When you are getting your cow from one spot to the other, and you come to my state, you are doing a business. You can lease a piece of land and do your ranching there. I mean, government is not doing enough. But we have far more important questions, and I agree with Deola. The only thing I disagree with Deola with is that he cannot run again. He has every right to run. We have every right to show him the way out. However, we must say this. Buhari went to Kano. He released 500 prisoners. That is about election. I mean, who do you think those 500 prisoners and their family will vote for? He went to Abia State, Anambra State. He released no single prisoner. Now, he's building...
Abia, you're talking about the Igbo country.
Yes. Now, he's building, he said he's going to build, before 2019, a train between the North and Niger Republic. During the election, they're going to use that to bring down, to bring the Nigerians back to the North to come and vote. These are more important issues. And that is why when you ask, if we don't talk about Buhari, who do we talk about? Nigeria is blessed. Nigeria is blessed. Let's not insult God to say that this man is the only one who can do it. Hold on. Now, when you now talk about the youth too, the youth of Nigerians are they are even worse than these old ones. Because there's nobody that prepared them.
No, I pose that question because we have a similar question, I would say, for the Democrats here in the United States, where we have aging leaders. You look at Nancy Pelosi, you look at Joe Biden, even Buhari seems like he's the Joe Biden of Nigeria, like dang near 80 and wanting to maybe, you know, run again. And it's the same here with the Democrats, that you ask, well, are they nurturing anybody in their ranks to be able to take up that mantle? Again, it doesn't necessarily have to be from the APC, but just sort of, I think from an outsider's perspective, it's not to say that Buhari is the only one, but also to look at, okay, so then who are the ones to watch? Who are the ones? And so I think it's one thing to say Buhari is bad, but to not propose any sort of alternatives or to have us think about who fits the profile of a 21st century Nigerian leader. Hopefully, maybe women. You know, I think we should talk more about even whether or not women should be more in Nigerian politics. But I think that is what I wanted to mention to you.
You know, no society is static. Society, like people, are dynamic. What about the issue of the changing, demographics? The changing demographics, accompanied by or in tandem with, in fact, social media. Don't you honestly think that this is going to bring about some significant changes? Because let's face it, the majority of the people of Nigeria, or the majority of the people of the African continent, or even all over the world right now, they are very young people. They are not invested in the status quo. They want change. And you know, there is a saying that, especially in Africa, that those individuals or people who have ideas have no power. And those who have power have no ideas. Is it possible for these two different types of people to interact and figure out together how to develop Africa?
Well, it's difficult in Nigeria.
Why?
We have people who have brilliant ideas, but because they don't have money. Nobody, and they cannot invest in them because those who have money, they get rich because of dealings with politicians. So these are the issues. Nigeria is a now when you talk about people using social media, majority of Southerners in Nigeria may be using social media. My brothers and sisters in the north. So I mean, and these are the people that they claim to even be more than the people in the south. That is why we are clamoring for restructuring of the country.
You can extend it there. I mean, I read a lot about Singapore, for example, how it developed. Lee Kuan Yew man, you're talking about. I mean, Lee Kuan Yew was in power for 31 years as a prime minister. But he developed the country from a third world country to a first world. And the Malays were the majority. They were underdeveloped. He went to the elders and said, you know what? You have to help me, help you, so that we can help Singapore.
So that those Nigerian Kagame.
Yeah, but these people, they are not about helping Nigerians. We have a gentleman now called Innocent. He's manufacturing Nigerian vehicles. He's been frustrated. He's been taken to court. No encouragement. We have many Nigerians who are extremely talented, who want to build Nigeria, but they have been frustrated. This is the issue.
Let me ask, yes, please. Let me ask Adiola to weigh in, really, because we haven't talked to Adiola. This is the last question because time is running out. Given that 1 out of 4 Africans is a Nigerian, to what extent is Abuja a beacon of hope for Africa, really, in any particular area or endeavor?
So I'm going to answer that question indirectly. First of all, I think we are no longer in our rightful place as the beacon of hope for Africa. Right now, a lot of people are looking at South Africa. People are looking at Rwanda. People are looking at Kenya. If you want to go for vacation in Africa, Nigeria is probably not your first option, your first choice, I should say, when you think about Boko Haram, when you think about so many issues. But I also wanted to say something to the gentleman that made the phone call. Nobody is blaming Buhari for the Fulani herdsmen killings, and it's not because Buhari is Fulani, but because of his reaction to the killings. I was saying the other time that they killed like 70 people in one day in Benue State. He didn't go there. He sent a police bus. The police bus left within 24 hours, and Buhari didn't know until weeks later that the policeman that he sent there didn't know. Like, how do you call yourself president and you are not up to date on this? And then you talked about Nigerian doctors. Unfortunately,
Adiola, frankly, time happens not to be our best ally.
Oh, okay.
Before we go, I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge the passing of Kenya's Kenneth Matiba, who died on April 14th in Nairobi at 85. He was a true champion of democracy and a great crusader for Kenya's multi-party democracy. In 1990, at the behest of Daniel Arap Moi, Matiba was imprisoned after calling for a multi-party democracy. Later, a multi-party system was instituted in Kenya, and Matiba was released. In 1992, he finished second in a presidential bid to Moi, and he also founded the People newspaper in 2000. He released his autobiography, Aiming High. We extend our deepest sympathies to his wife Edith, his son Raymond, and to all of his family and friends. May his soul rest in eternal peace. As a matter of fact, there are people who think he was the president that Kenya never had. On that note, thanks to our distinguished guests, Karen Atia, Benelane Lebanjo, and Adiola Fayehon. Thanks to our affiliate stations, along with our viewers and listeners. For many of our Voice of America radio affiliates, Learning English is coming up next. And tomorrow morning, Daybreak Africa with James Bate. On behalf of the Voice of America, thanks for tuning into Straight Talk Africa. In the meantime, get better, not bitter, Nigeria. And please remember to keep the African hopes alive.
Zibracorn is going to be a company that's built in Africa, for Africa, and skilled in Africa.